Polycystic ovary syndrome involves FSH hormone or follicle stimulating hormone, LH or luteinizing hormone, high testosterone levels in women, and high insulin along with insulin resistance. This video explains how ovaries make an ovum. That's a mature egg from what are called primordial follicles. We'll talk about normal ovulation along with disrupted ovulation from PCOS. You'll learn what causes ovarian cysts as well as what causes PCOS in general. You'll also discover how symptoms of high testosterone in women are rooted in PCOS insulin resistance. Stay to the end of the video to find out exactly why PCOS causes the 4 most bothersome PCOS symptoms. That would be unwanted hair growth, weight gain, missed periods, anovulation, and infertility. I'm Steve Goldring, the hormone pharmacist from simplehormones.com. I'm kind of a physiology geek. Ever since I took Mr. Thompson's physiology class in the 10th grade in high school, I've kind of nerded out over the fascinating processes of the body, especially reproduction and hormones. I'm all about helping patients and healthcare providers with easy to understand patient education resources. And I kind of specialize in hormones and hormone optimization. The material in this video comes right out of my brand new program called Simple Hormones for PCOS. Simple Hormones for PCOS helps women understand the root problem underneath PCOS and, more importantly, the actionable steps that you can take to eliminate the root problem and relieve the symptoms at the same time. Click the link that says PCOS course to learn more about it. I want to talk a little bit about normal female reproduction. Most of us are familiar with a 28-day menstrual cycle that can be divided up into 3 general phases. The first phase is called the follicular phase. The follicular phase goes from day 0 to 14. The second phase is called ovulation. It's really a very short phase that's 1 day, approximately day 15, give or take. The third phase is called the luteal phase, and that runs from day 16 through day 28. The hypothalamus is involved with female reproduction, along with the pituitary and the ovaries. The ovaries contain something called a follicle, or also called a primordial follicle. That's an immature egg cell that's inside every ovary. A baby girl has about 400,000 of these follicles at birth, and over the course of your lifetime, you use those follicles up until at menopause, you basically have none left. So the hypothalamus sends a message to the pituitary gland. The hypothalamus and pituitary are located right in the center of your skull, right underneath your brain. The hypothalamus sends a message right next door to the pituitary, and that message says, "Hey pituitary, let's stimulate some follicles." The pituitary gets that message in the form of something called GnRH, or gonadotropin releasing hormone. And the pituitary understands exactly what that message means. In response to that message, the pituitary sends out its own message to the ovaries. It says, "Hey ovaries, here's some FSH and LH. I want you to start maturing about 3 to 5 eggs this month." FSH and LH are 2 different hormones called follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. And those 2 hormones are a message to the ovaries. And the ovaries understand what that message means. And the ovaries respond by saying, "Okay, 3 to 5 follicles coming up." Now, ovulation happens, as I mentioned, around day 15. That's when an ovum, or a mature egg, is released. The ovary says, "Okay, I've got 1 mature ovum. I'll call it the chosen one, and it's time to release it. Out you go." When the ovum is released from the ovary, it goes out into the fallopian tube. It's located just outside the ovary, and it goes to the fallopian tube just in case there might be some sperm around. The ovary says to the egg, "Good luck." Now, when the egg gets out into the fallopian tube, it's possible that there are sperm headed into the fallopian tube around the same time as ovulation, looking for just such an ovum that the sperm can fertilize. Well, if that sperm finds that egg and they get together, then there's fertilization and we have a positive pregnancy test. Now, after that ovulation occurs, there's a piece of tissue left behind in the ovary. It's called corpus luteum. Corpus luteum is Latin, which means yellow body. It's kind of a yellow color when you look at it under a microscope. Now, that corpus luteum is left behind in the ovary so that it can release a couple of hormones and send those hormone information packets to the uterus. Those hormones are called estradiol and progesterone. The corpus luteum essentially says, hey uterus, get ready just in case there's a baby to be implanted in the uterus. Now the uterus, in response to that message of estradiol and progesterone, causes a buildup of the lining inside the uterus. The lining is also called the endometrium. At the end of the cycle, there's something called menstruation. And that's where the lining of the uterus or the endometrium is actually sloughed off in the form of menstrual bleeding. So testosterone is a sex hormone that comes from the ovaries. Now, there's also something called sex hormone binding globulin, and that's produced by the liver. And the liver makes this SHBG, and it's kind of, you can think of it as jail for testosterone. It puts out a message that says, hold on there, testosterone, not so fast. And it keeps testosterone from just going crazy, going everywhere in the body. And SHBG not only acts as a jail, it also acts as a bus. Testosterone hops on the bus and is taken around the body to various places where it needs to go. So what causes PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome? I'm glad you asked. The main thing that causes it is something called insulin resistance. And to understand insulin resistance, we need to understand about blood sugar. The pancreas, which is what secretes insulin in your body, looks around in your blood and sees that there is some sugar in your blood, or often called glucose or blood glucose. And the pancreas says, we must need more insulin. And so in response to sugar, the pancreas secretes insulin. Now sometimes the amount of sugar in the bloodstream is actually higher and higher and higher, and the pancreas says, we must need a lot more insulin. So it starts creating high insulin levels. This is a situation that we call insulin resistance. That's where the insulin isn't really working well to get that sugar out of the blood and into the cells. And so the sugar builds up and creates pretty high blood sugar levels. And so in response, the pancreas creates pretty high insulin levels, also called hyperinsulinemia. High insulin levels cause weight gain. One of the easiest ways to make people gain weight is to raise their insulin levels or give them insulin injections. Another thing that happens with high insulin levels is that insulin goes to the ovary and causes the ovary to produce additional testosterone. What's the root cause of high testosterone in women? Moderately high to high blood glucose levels signal the pancreas to release additional insulin because the insulin's not working right in insulin resistance. High insulin levels tell the ovaries to make extra high levels of testosterone, and the high levels of testosterone are what causes masculinization. Now, what we have here is a disrupted follicular phase, the early phase that lasts from day 0 to day 14. We have a message that goes from the hypothalamus to the pituitary and another one that goes from the pituitary to the ovary. But because of the high insulin levels, the hypothalamus and the pituitary are sending incorrect amounts of those follicle-stimulating hormones and luteinizing hormones to the ovaries. So we get wrong amounts of FSH and LH going from the pituitary to the ovary. The hypothalamus says, hey pituitary, I'm not sure what to do about follicles. And the pituitary says, hey ovaries, there's some FSH and LH, blah 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 blah. It's kind of a garbled message. And then the ovary says, well, I guess I'll make 12 to 15 follicles backing up. So normally we've got 3 to 5 follicles coming out of the ovary and one of those turning into an ovum or a mature egg. But when there's a disrupted follicular phase, instead of 3 to 5 follicles, the ovary starts with 12 to 15 follicles and none of them ever actually get to become a mature egg. So we have no ovum or egg. We have no ovulation. And ultimately, that's infertility. The ovary says, well, there's no mature ovum, so there's no ovulation this month. What causes ovarian cysts? A disrupted follicular phase causes immature follicles to get arrested, and they kind of build up and become lumpy little cysts on the outside of ovaries, or basically right under the surface. Eventually, after 12 to 15 of those little follicles turn into cysts every month, Eventually, there are hundreds of those that are visible on a pelvic ultrasound in the ovary. Now let's look at the luteal phase, which is days 16 to 28. In the luteal phase, if it's been disrupted, there's no corpus luteum that's left behind in the ovary because there was no ovulation. So because there's no corpus luteum, there's really no luteal phase at all. The uterus gets some estradiol from the ovaries, but it doesn't get very much progesterone. So the messages are garbled and mixed. Also, when we look at testosterone and sex hormone binding globulin, that process is disrupted as well. Normally, the liver says, hold on there, testosterone, but it produces a lot less of that SHBG. So the testosterone jail keeping testosterone in check is not working very well, and the testosterone bus that moves testosterone around the body is not working that well. High insulin levels lead to too much testosterone from the ovaries. Liver producing less SHBG doesn't hold on to testosterone as well as it used to, and it doesn't lessen its effects. That high testosterone and low SHBG causes more masculinization symptoms, and it helps to stop ovulation. So high insulin levels, or hyperinsulinemia, affect the ovary by making high testosterone. That high testosterone is not kept in check by SHBG very well, and so we get a lot of masculinization, unwanted hair growth, and we get anovulation or no ovulation, which is the same as infertility. We have a disrupted luteal phase because there's no ovulation. There's no corpus luteum, and there's no luteal phase. The ovaries send less estradiol and progesterone to the uterus. The endometrium builds, but it doesn't really slough off properly, leading to either late or missed periods. We don't have menstrual bleeding when we're supposed to. So I told you if you stayed to the end, you could find out what causes the most bothersome PCOS symptoms. And I listed 4 of those. And now we know that insulin resistance is really the root cause of the testosterone that leads to masculinization. It's the cause of weight gain. It's the cause of missed periods. And it's the cause of not ovulating and infertility. Well, if this basic physiology lesson about normal reproduction and the disrupted reproduction of PCOS has been helpful at all, leave a comment in the space below. Click the PCOS course link to learn more about simple hormones for PCOS, my online patient education program that this lesson comes directly from. If you're a healthcare practitioner, you can provide this PCOS educational material and much more to your patients, saving time and frustration in your patient education process. It's almost like hiring an experienced, dedicated patient education specialist at a fraction of what that might cost. Visit my website, simplehormones.com, for more details. Be sure to click the like and subscribe buttons to get notified whenever I post a new patient education resource. Thanks, and we'll talk again soon.